just going to talk. Hi, I'm brand new to Kansas and happy to be here. I'm very happy to, and thankful to all you who stayed around for the last talk. That's always a challenge. I'm going to present you with a problem. Give you a little bit of background. Before coming here, I was directing one of 4 museums in Arizona for the Arizona Historical Society, which has a collection of they state 2.2 million items. A lot of those are archival and library items, but a significant artifact collection. And the problem that we are facing in the world of museums is that libraries put us to shame. Libraries put us to shame in so many ways. In the aggressiveness with which materials have been digitized, the willingness to share information across institutions, and so I want to just lay out some of the challenges that we're facing, and I'm going to be asking for your help, I think, in the end. So I'm going to focus on object collections. Museums certainly have vast collections of other types of materials, but it's the object collections that are focused. I'm going to pay most attention to historical collections. There was a publication back in 2005 sponsored by the IMLS and the Conservation Institute of America that it was called the Heritage Health Index. I don't know if you're aware of it. They sent out a questionnaire to something like 15,000 institutions, collection holdings institutions, and because it was the National Institute of Conservation, they were interested in the health of collections, what collections needed help. Based on their survey, they received 3,300 responses, about 24% responded. They came up with a estimate of 4.8 billion items in collection holding institutions, out of which 22%, or about 1 billion, are in historical societies and museums and are collections. It's a big number, big data. And then they asked what percent of those collections are accessible by some sort of catalog. They didn't ask about a digital catalog, they just wanted to know what percentage are accessible. And of that, about 50% had less than 40% of their collections cataloged. About 25%, and we're talking about historical societies and history museums, not art museums, and those are in a different category. But they also have large numbers of things uncatalogued. And about 80% stated that they had a need, or an urgent need, for some help in getting documentation on their collection. So we have an issue. Now, the reason I focus on history museums is they are sort of at the bottom of the food chain in the museum world. I'll just give you an example. I just sort of pulled out of the hat, but then these are going to be very gross numbers. But Philadelphia Museum of Art, they state that they have about 225,000 objects, and they have 500 staff. So if we're going to just do some big gross arithmetic, we're going to say there's about 250 objects per staff. Then I met yesterday evening with the person who's in charge of the Eudora Historical Society, just down the road. They have about 4,000 objects and 1 half-time paid staff. So that's about 8,000 objects per staff to take care of. The 2011 operating budget of the Philadelphia Museum of Art was $51 million. I don't know exactly what the Eudora Historical Society operating budget is, given that they have 1/2 of a salary. Let's just say it's somewhere around $25,000, 8,000 objects. That's $2.50 per object. $250 per object. I'm sorry, they spend about $250 per object versus $2.50 per object. So this is the world we are in, and you know, I'm not comparing this to other institutions, but history museums are dear to my heart, and we have needs. In simple preservation questions, it was estimated by the Heritage Health Index again that artifacts in American collections that are at risk of needing immediate attention, they estimated 4.7 million works of art, 13.5 million historic objects, and 153 million photographs. So, one of the ways that we started to try to address this problem when I was in Arizona was we developed a beginnings of what we call the Central Arizona Heritage Coalition. And we brought together, we started with just 3 institutions, but one was the State Historical Society, a state institution. One was a private nonprofit museum, and the other was a city museum. So we had 3 different forms of governance that we wanted to explore how we could work together to tackle some of these problems. We all have, in my view, the most difficult thing to deal with. I hope I would never have to accession another vehicle, ever. A cotton harvester. Well, Central Arizona is cotton country. And every darn historical society ends up with a decrepit cotton harvester because, you know, they don't use them anymore, they wear out, and so where's it going to go? It's going to go to the Historical Society. Now, as soon as we make that decision to accession one more cotton harvester, what are we doing? What's our purpose? What are we trying to do? It's, you know, it wasn't the cotton harvester that Teddy Roosevelt rode on. It wasn't the, it was just, it's an old one, so they think it belongs in the museum. And so everybody had one. Everybody seemed to have a motorcycle. They actually seemed to have a police motorcycle. The police departments all bought the same kind of motorcycles. And so we started to try to ask the question, where do these things belong? How can we simplify our work among institutions to move collections from one institution to another? Whether permanently changing ownership or on some sort of long-term loan arrangement. And so actually we started to assemble, one of the institutions in our coalition was the City of Chandler City Museum. But they also operate a ranch, which was a farm, and so they had all kinds of room for farm equipment. So we started moving farm equipment off of the property of the Mesa Historical Society which is the private nonprofit, so they had more flexibility in how they could shift property around. And which is based at an old school. So cotton harvesters in the grounds of an old school are a tough link to make. So we were able to get the resources together to physically move these amazing things. We found a farmer who happened to have tires that fit the old cotton harvester, so we could get it on the truck to get it across town. And so those are the kinds of physical collection issues that we are dealing with and facing. The other piece, again, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my sense is that the approach that museums bring to collecting versus libraries, I think it's because we are dealing with objects that we like to think are singular, that we're looking at the unique, distinctive item versus a book or something that has expression in multiple locations. We get very possessive, and each institution seems to have its own collecting policy, and we seem to collect without reference to what else is out there in the region, in the world. So things start piling up at each institution, and then we become faced with the problem down the line of why have we taken this into the public trust, promised to manage it in perpetuity, and not thought about general resources. So our coalition was working toward developing a consciousness of items across institutions to enable institutions to plan their collecting activities, which means what kinds of storage facilities do you need. If you're going to be the repository for farm equipment, you need a different kind of storage plan than if you're going to be the repository for spring training baseball, which is what Mesa Historical Society wanted to focus on. And so if you knew that the next time somebody pulled up with their cotton harvester, you could say, at Mesa, you could say, I know just where you ought to take that, and not feel like we've got to have that cotton harvester in our own backyard. And so having greater conversations among institutions about where do we have strength, where do we see our collection going, what's the goal on a regional basis for acquiring those things that effectively and appropriately give us a sense of the past in this region. We are at a point where this has become a critical question to ask, and it's a point where we are having to really ask institutions to think in ways that they haven't been trained to think before. And think about artifacts, think about objects as not necessarily being focused in one or spread around in different places, but if we could build a single repository for historical collections somewhere in Central Arizona, it would take us leagues down the wet road of then being able to sort out what's useful and what isn't useful. So this is, I haven't even talked about digitizing. Digitizing and digital inventories are, for many museums, well, there are now computer-based cataloging systems, and many people use them. There's a very widespread one in history museums called Past Perfect that has the capacity to share for data sharing, but it takes the insistence of institutions to engage in that data sharing that we have to adjust. The ways that when we do go online and find collections reported, and whether you can do searches on lots of museums, but what ends up going online tends to be a selection of collections, tends to be not the whole collection. It tends to be, I've gotten extremely frustrated with many institutions who decided that, well, we're going to do a computer-based inventory of our collections. And so since, the logic here is good, since we're going to go through and pick up every darn thing in our collections, we're going to take a picture of it. Well, you can take a picture and you can take a picture. You can get your lights just right. You can frame just perfectly. You can take 13 pictures and you can spend half an hour on every photograph. And you can end up having this process take decades. And, or you can say, we're going to go through this process as fast as possible. The purpose of our image is record keeping, not publication. So, because I can promise you, next time some researcher comes in and says, oh, I think this is great, I want to publish it, they're going to want to publish the other side. They're going to want to turn it around. Or, in historical museums, the percentage of items that are publication worthy is very small. And so the ability to get the picture right for the little teacup that doesn't make sense. That and I speak from some experience because I was faced a long time ago with the problem of doing a photographic inventory of a major anthropological collection in Los Angeles, where there were something like 250,000 objects. And so we we just made the decision, we're going to take a picture that we can use to recognize this object at some future time. And we were taking pictures on 16mm movie film, single frame at a time. I mean, we're taking that fast, but the purpose was to get it done. And we actually got it done in about 9 months. So that we then could produce a digital record of that collection. And it succeeded. In fact, it succeeded so well that those images, bad as they were, sent a person to jail because that person pilfered items from the collection, and we were able to call up those pictures and say, here it is, photographed in the museum, and here it is on the dealer's shelf. And so having that done quickly but not well in terms of photographic documentation was our approach. And so I'm a broken record on that side of addressing the issue of documenting collections digitally. Because yes, it is true. Go through once, you have to if you have to pick something up, you might as well gather as much data as possible about it when you're doing that. So So I'm just going to finish there and hope that you have shared my pain, gotten a sense of what kinds of issues we are facing, and I depend on your good ideas for how we might tackle this problem as we go forward. So thank you. So, any ideas? Help.
So are the databases shared somehow in Arizona now? I mean, is it possible? Okay.
I mean, you can go from one institution to another,
right.
And if they have material online, you can.
Okay, but they haven't been aggregated in any useful way.
No.
That would be the way to do it.
Right, but unless we're all using the same software, which is actually the American Association of State and Local History pushes past perfect because they see that as an opportunity down the road.
I've shared your pain. I used to work with the State Historical Society at a time when my husband was the director of the Boone County Historical Society in Missouri, and the society had a preponderance of Bibles, and the Boone County Historical Society always got pianos whenever somebody moved.
They're just as bad.
Yeah, I think it's really important to do the consortium and so that you all have an idea of what you want to collect, and also to have a really strong deaccessioning policy and acquisitions policy where you can say, that's not for us, and everyone knows that they can say that, and whether it doesn't become a political thing.
Right. Small historical societies have a tougher, because it was, there's a very political component to what you take.
Maybe a little bit of a different issue, but I think Powerhouse Museum in Australia its collections database open to the public on API, which is a different visualizations or mapping visualizations of the whole. Do you know of other museums doing that, or if there's interest in the wider museum community doing that?
There is interest, and there are some of the projects that are escaping me right now, but yes, there are places that have done that in gallery settings. But
do it design again, with its, at least certain, I think it can hold power, this is something about it. Not the images, actually given by the data.
right.
Well, I've spent many years surveying and inventorying lots of collections. I've been in preservation for over 30 years. And I was 8 years at the Wisconsin Historical Society. If you're familiar with their collections, they're humongous. And they've got 13 sites and museums now in the state, including like the Baraboo Circus Museum and stuff. We surveyed all of the collections for preservation needs, myself and a small staff. And you're absolutely right. It's a decision-making exercise where you have to decide practically, as well as looking into the future, what your priorities are and what they're going to be, and what information you want to pull out when you've got the chance. And I guess since I'm here at Kansas, I'd be happy to talk to you about some of the procedures that I've come up with over the years.